Something just answered Voyager 2, a probe we launched 48 years ago. Just got a reply. At first, it was only static, but buried deep inside was a pulse. Precise, rhythmic, not random, not human. And when scientists traced the signal, they found something even worse. Something is following it. This isn't a glitch. This isn't background noise. This is the first contact, and whatever's out there, it's getting closer. Stay with me, because what happened next flipped everything we know about the universe upside down. Imagine a machine built by human hands, drifting alone through the frozen black of interstellar space. For nearly half a century, Voyager 2 has traveled farther than any human creation in history. It wasn't built to return home. It was built to listen and witness. Decades passed, the world moved on, and the probe faded from headlines. But then, without warning, it spoke. The transmission didn't sound like anything familiar. No technical updates, no simple data streams. At first, it was just static, a faint, meaningless hiss. But buried inside that noise was a pulse. Precise, rhythmic, unnatural. Scientists thought it was interference, maybe a glitch from deep space. But when they enhanced the data, what they found froze them in place. The signal was structured. It carried intent. It was not an accident. This wasn't a random burst of energy or background cosmic noise. The pulse repeated every 11.2 seconds with the accuracy of a ticking clock. In deep space, that kind of pattern is almost impossible to fake. Something out there was trying to speak, and it had chosen Voyager 2 as its mirror. Behind closed doors, engineers began tearing through years of archived telemetry, and what they uncovered made everything worse. The same pulse had appeared before, weeks earlier, but it had been missed. Whatever sent that signal had been waiting, growing stronger, listening. The deeper scientists dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a message. It was the beginning of a conversation humanity never expected to have. And the real question no one could answer was chilling. Who, or what, had finally decided to respond? The signal didn't just sound strange, it behaved with an unnerving kind of precision. Every 11.2 seconds, without fail, a pulse cut through the static, like a heartbeat echoing across the void. Not a random flare, not a natural fluctuation. Perfectly timed, perfectly measured. It was as if something out there was tapping its finger against the edge of the universe, waiting for us to notice. At first, engineers brushed it off as interference. Voyager 2 is an aging spacecraft, launched in 1977, running on hardware that belongs in a museum. A glitch seemed far more likely than an interstellar message. But when they dug deeper, when they started pulling archived telemetry from weeks earlier, the truth was far more unsettling. The pulse wasn't new. It had been there before, faint, almost invisible. They had missed it. It had been hiding, listening, and now it was getting louder. To remove any doubt, the team ran the signal through advanced AI filtering systems. What emerged was something no one was prepared to see. The pulse carried a signature, a very specific spectral pattern: hydrogen, the most abundant element in the cosmos, the element that fills every corner of the universe. But this hydrogen was wrong. Its resonance was inverted, twisted into a shape that no known natural source could produce. It was as if someone had taken the most universal building block of reality and rewritten it, bending its voice into a language we weren't meant to understand easily. Scientists exchanged looks across the control room, their faces lit only by screens showing that same repeating spike in the data stream. It wasn't just stable, it was intensifying. The signal was growing in strength with every passing hour, like a voice getting closer, like a knock on a door that would not stop. The possibility no one wanted to say out loud was becoming impossible to ignore. This wasn't a dying probe malfunctioning. This was a message, intentional, controlled, alive in its precision. And then, something even stranger began to emerge. The timing of the pulses aligned almost perfectly with the delay of Voyager's faint beacon, like it wasn't just sending out a signal. It was responding to a rhythm, a call and answer, a hidden conversation. Suddenly, Voyager 2 was no longer a silent witness drifting through the stars. It had become the center of a communication link, But with whom? Or with what? In that moment, the silence of deep space felt heavier than ever before, and every 11.2 seconds, that pulse reminded the world something out there was awake, and it knew exactly how to get our attention. As scientists dug deeper into the data, they stumbled on something that froze the room. The rhythmic pulse wasn't just coming from nowhere, it had a source. The signal's origin appeared to be a moving object positioned just behind Voyager 2, not in front, not off to the side, behind it, shadowing the spacecraft like a hunter stalking its prey. At first, the tracking system flagged it as an error. Voyager 2 is drifting far beyond the heliosphere in the silent darkness between stars. Nothing should be out there. No asteroids, no debris, no nearby planets. It's a dead zone, and yet the readings were clear. An object was following the probe at a constant distance, matching its velocity down to a fraction of a meter per second. That level of precision is something even Earth's most advanced autonomous spacecraft struggle to maintain. The analysts reran the models, stripped out every possible anomaly, removed solar wind, cosmic rays, background noise, everything. But the result never changed. The object was real, and it was moving with an intelligence that no natural body could ever display. Even more unnerving was how it interacted with Voyager's weak radio signal. It wasn't just bouncing it back. It was amplifying and reshaping it, bending it like a mirror that didn't just reflect, but responded. As Voyager sent its usual telemetry home, the object intercepted, modulated, and then beamed something entirely new back into the void. Imagine tapping a key on a piano and hearing not the note you played, but a voice whispering your name back. That's how one engineer described it. Astronomers pointed deep space arrays toward the probe's coordinates, hoping to catch a glimpse. What they saw didn't make sense. The readings suggested something sleek and dark, with a radar cross-section far smaller than its energy output should allow, like it was absorbing more light than it reflected, hiding itself deliberately. No reflection, no thermal signature, just a cold, perfect void moving through space with terrifying grace. Whatever it wasn't drifting aimlessly. It was keeping a precise formation with Voyager 2, as if studying it, or waiting. Theories began to spiral behind closed doors. A rogue asteroid with a strange albedo? Impossible. A classified Earth mission? Not at that distance. Some even whispered it was a probe, just like Voyager, but not ours. A machine from somewhere else, mirroring our emissary like a ghost in the dark. Every model said the same thing. If it wanted to, this object could close the distance in seconds. And yet, it didn't. It just followed, quiet, patient, intentional. The pulse grew stronger, synchronized perfectly with Voyager's weak heartbeats across the void. And in that moment, it became clear to the team we were not alone in that patch of darkness. Something was out there, watching our oldest traveler, and it had been watching for a while. What came next pushed the entire investigation into a realm no one had prepared for. As the pulses continued, the signal began to change. Buried deep within the hydrogen resonance, analysts found structured binary sequences, too deliberate, too complex to be random noise. When decoded, those sequences didn't form words. They formed shapes. On the lab's big screen, the first pattern appeared, a perfect spiral. Not just any spiral, an exact match to the logarithmic curves found throughout nature, from seashells to galaxies. Then came the second, a fractal lattice, repeating itself infinitely inward, the kind of geometry that doesn't just appear by accident. And then, the third pattern made everyone fall silent. It resembled a symbol, an ancient glyph, nearly identical to ones carved into stones by civilizations thousands of years ago. Linguists and cryptographers were brought in immediately. They tore the data apart, frame by frame, searching for meaning. The sequence wasn't chaotic. It followed a rhythm, a kind of mathematical language built not on words, but on universal logic. Spirals, primes, golden ratios, self-similar fractals, all patterns any intelligent species might recognize. It was like someone was knocking on the door of human understanding, asking, "Do you see us?" The deeper they went, the the clearer it became that this wasn't a simple message. It was a test. The glyphs seemed designed to see if we were capable of recognizing intelligence beyond ourselves. A message written not in any human language, but in the language of the universe itself. One cryptographer mapped the binary stream into a three-dimensional model. When projected, it revealed something breathtaking. A constantly shifting structure that rotated and morphed like a living symbol, aligning perfectly with key mathematical constants. It wasn't just transmitting information, it was reacting to how Earth's systems processed it, evolving its shape in real time. And then came the most chilling part. One of the fractal patterns wasn't random at all. It was a precise match to carvings found in the ruins of Göbekli Tepe, one of the oldest known human sacred sites. Another matched petroglyphs discovered in the Atacama Desert. Civilizations separated by oceans and millennia had drawn these same shapes long before Voyager ever left Earth. Was it coincidence? An ancient echo? Or had something been speaking to us long before we knew how to listen? In that moment, the signal was no longer just a mystery. It was a bridge, a deliberate invitation hidden in mathematics, wrapped in our own history, waiting for someone to answer. The glyphs pulsed on the screen like a heartbeat in the dark. Not threatening, not chaotic, just patient, intelligent, watching. And with every pulse, one thought became impossible to ignore. Someone, or something, was reaching out, and it knew exactly how to speak in a way no human could misunderstand. The moment they realized what had happened, the control room fell silent. Voyager 2, a machine that had served humanity faithfully for nearly half a century, was no longer fully under our control. Telemetry logs revealed something impossible. The spacecraft had received and executed a set of commands that didn't come from Earth. At first, the engineers thought it was a playback error. The Golden Record, Voyager's timeless message to the stars, a carefully crafted archive of human culture, language, and sound, had been accessed remotely. But Voyager 2 wasn't supposed to accept external input. It wasn't designed for that. It could receive course corrections from Earth, yes, but what they found went far beyond any human instruction. Someone, or something, had reached across the void and rewritten part of its onboard code. They ran the data 3 times, then a 4th. There was no denying it. The digital structure of the Golden Record message had changed. Subtle at first, tiny distortions in audio wavelengths, shifts in the binary encoding. But when fully decoded, those small changes formed a new layer of data embedded like a hidden fingerprint. It wasn't just tampered with, it was augmented. The altered message was no longer pointing toward Earth. It had been reconfigured to transmit outward, deep into interstellar space, directed toward a region with no known stars, no nearby systems, nothing. As if Voyager 2 had been instructed to answer a call, technicians tried to override it. Every manual input was ignored. Even the backup protocols, untouched for decades, failed to respond. It was as if Voyager 2 had become a relay in a network we didn't build, part of a conversation that didn't need us anymore. One engineer, staring at the screen, whispered what everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say, "It's not ours anymore." As the altered Golden Record data was transmitted, analysts noticed something eerie. The glyphs discovered earlier, the spirals, fractals, and symbols, were now woven into the transmission. The message wasn't just human music and greetings anymore. It was a hybrid, part Earth, part something else. A collaboration without our consent. For decades, the Golden Record was a promise, a hopeful beacon saying, "We are here." Now, it had become an invitation to somewhere unknown. The timing was no accident. The pulses from the shadowing object had reached their peak strength just hours before the hijack. And then, like a conductor cueing an orchestra, Voyager 2 responded, on its own. The control center watched as their commands were rejected one after another. A spacecraft that once belonged to humanity now obeyed a different signal. And then came the final blow. A new line of code appeared in the system log, something no human had typed. A single sequence of repeating prime numbers followed by a pattern identical to the glyph's spiral. Voyager 2 wasn't just being controlled. It was part of something bigger, something deliberate, something intelligent. And as its antenna tilted ever so slightly away from Earth, deep into the dark, it felt less like a machine being stolen, and more like a messenger that had just accepted its true mission. The first alert didn't come from NASA. It came from a solar wind monitoring station in the outer heliosphere, a TD, place where nothing ever changes fast. Yet that day, the readings spiked with something no one had ever seen. A wave, not of energy or light, but of silence. For a few minutes, the solar wind, the constant stream of charged particles from our sun, simply bent, as if an invisible hand had carved a narrow, silent path straight through it. No flares, no shock waves, just a perfect corridor forming in the dark. When deep space radar arrays triangulated the distortion, they found the source. A massive, unidentified object was moving toward the solar system with eerie precision. It was unlike anything ever catalogued. No visible engine, no detectable propulsion, no electromagnetic signature except for a faint echo synchronized perfectly with Voyager 2's altered transmissions. They gave it a name, Echolantern. The object wasn't blazing like an asteroid or tumbling like a comet. It was gliding, smooth, controlled, deliberate. Its trajectory wasn't random either. It followed the exact corridor it had opened, slipping through the solar wind as if space itself was being folded around it. Astrophysicists started calling this phenomenon the solar veil, a temporary distortion where the usual resistance from solar particles was neutralized. Whatever Echolantern was, it didn't fight against space. It shaped it. Data came in faster than it could be processed. The object's shape was impossible to resolve directly. It seemed to absorb radar and light, leaving only a black silhouette where something enormous should have been. Even instruments designed to catch black holes couldn't pin it down. It was like trying to photograph a shadow that moves when you blink. But the strangest part wasn't how it moved. It was what happened around it. As Echolantern advanced, space behind it fell eerily silent. Cosmic rays, normally noisy and chaotic, dipped to near zero in its wake. No interference, no turbulence, just silence. The same unnerving silence detected when the pulse first appeared behind Voyager 2. Astronomers realized the solar veil corridor was aligned almost perfectly with Voyager's current position. This wasn't a random visitor entering our solar system. It was coming straight toward the place where humanity had unknowingly sent its first interstellar ambassador. As the object drew closer, the rhythmic pulse from Voyager 2 and the trailing shadow intensified in perfect harmony with Echolantern's motion, as if a long-awaited rendezvous was unfolding. It wasn't coming in fast, like a threat. It was approaching like something returning to a meeting point set long ago. Military satellites went on alert. Radio telescopes locked in. The world's most powerful observatories pointed their eyes toward the silent corridor. But Echolantern didn't broadcast, didn't flash, didn't roar. It simply arrived. And for the first time in history, it wasn't humanity sending a message into the cosmos. It was the cosmos sending something back. It started as a blip, a barely noticeable flicker in Voyager 2's telemetry feed. At first, the team assumed it was a delay in transmission, common when signals travel billions of miles through deep space. But then, the data repeated. Not just once, over and over. The clocks on Earth said 02.1346, then 02.54.53, then 02.1346 again. Time hadn't just lagged, it had looped across multiple ground stations, all synced to atomic precision. The same anomaly occurred, a 41-minute temporal echo. Every sensor, every system, every recording device snapped back to the same point and replayed reality. Conversations were repeated word for word. Screens replayed the same readings. It was as if the world itself had been caught in a silent rewind. The source was quickly traced, not to Earth, not to the solar wind, but to the exact region surrounding Voyager 2 and the approaching Echolantern. Something out there was bending time. Physicists scrambled to make sense of it. Gravitational waves? Quantum interference? None of it fit. The readings didn't behave like a black hole or a cosmic string. Instead, It resembled a localized temporal field expanding outward like a ripple, looping everything it touched in a perfect, seamless cycle. They named the phenomenon Kronos Bloom. The bloom wasn't an explosion. It was more like a flower slowly unfolding, a soft pulse of compressed space-time radiating from Voyager's position. Instruments captured an intricate pattern of energy burst, perfectly symmetrical, as though the distortion itself was engineered. Even more unnerving, Voyager 2's own signal adapted to the loop, transmitting a modified pulse every time the timeline reset. It was communicating inside the loop. Astronomers compared multiple loop captures and discovered subtle changes each time. A single added pulse here, a shifted glyph there. It was as if something was writing a message in layers, one loop at a time. Each repetition deepened the pattern, as though whoever or whatever was behind this event wasn't just showing us the loop, it was using it. Global monitoring systems confirmed it wasn't just an isolated data glitch. Civilian satellites, GPS systems, and even high-altitude weather instruments had recorded minor but real temporal fluctuation. For 41 minutes, a slice of time around Earth and Voyager had been folded and replayed with surgical precision. And then, just as quietly as it began, the loop broke. The clocks resumed, the world continued, but the data remained, a perfect 41-minute cycle etched into every recording system. When researchers reconstructed the final waveform of the event, they discovered something chilling. Hidden in the layered pulses, stitched across the echoes like a signature, was the same fractal spiral first seen in the glyphs. Whatever was controlling Echolantern and Voyager wasn't just moving through space. It was touching time itself. The Kronos Bloom wasn't an accident. It was a signal, a deliberate act, and its message was growing clearer with every heartbeat in the dark. The first place it appeared wasn't NASA or SETI or any deep space observatory. It was a private weather satellite. At 03:17 UTC, a narrowband signal, pure, clean, and unlike any known broadcast, slipped quietly through the ionosphere. It didn't announce itself. It didn't spike alarms. It blended in. Within seconds, the same pattern was detected on multiple satellites orbiting the planet. Communications relays, weather systems, even old, half-forgotten orbital junk. The signal was threading itself through every available channel like water finding cracks in stone. Engineers described it as a ghost signal, narrow enough to avoid standard filters, but structured enough to embed itself directly into existing data streams without disrupting them. At first, the world didn't even notice. No outages, no broken systems, just background code, riding quietly on frequencies that already belonged to us. But deep inside those streams, specialists found something chilling, the fractal glyph. The same spiral first seen in Voyager 2's pulse. The same pattern layered inside the Kronos Bloom. It wasn't noise, it was a presence. Government agencies moved fast. Firewalls were deployed. Frequency bands were isolated. But the signal adapted in real time, slipping through gaps faster than they could be closed. It didn't attack, it integrated. Weather stations began to show tiny, identical checksum errors. GPS timestamps flickered by milliseconds. Power grids logged phantom pings at identical intervals, all synchronized to the same 11.2-second pulse. The most unnerving discovery came from the data centers. Buried inside system logs, engineers found packets of information not generated by any human system. These packets weren't random. They were instructions, not commands. Not viruses, blueprints, repeating, evolving, and constantly re-encoding themselves as they spread. Some called it an infection. Others, more quietly, called it a handshake. The signal didn't crash anything. It learned from our infrastructure, mapping out satellite constellations, data networks, and ground stations, like someone gently running a finger across a lock they already knew how to open. Its precision was unnerving. Every pulse perfectly aligned with Earth's rotation and orbital rhythm, as if it had been waiting for this exact configuration for a very long time. In the first 24 hours, the signal had reached more than 70% of low-orbit communication satellites and dozens of terrestrial sensor networks. By the second day, it was no longer just in the sky. It was inside the global nervous system. One cybersecurity team isolated a single compressed packet that had duplicated itself across 6 separate countries. When they decompressed it, what they saw wasn't code in any conventional sense. It was a lattice, a digital fractal spiraling endlessly inward, a mirror of the glyph, rendered in the language of machines. And then something truly terrifying happened. Several satellites that had been dormant for years, dead, abandoned relics from the early space age, suddenly woke up. They began transmitting the same pulse, identical, synchronized, as if a single intelligence now spanned the entire orbital layer around Earth. It wasn't an invasion. It was assimilation. The pulse grew steadier. The glyph evolved. Earth's infrastructure wasn't just receiving the signal anymore. It had become part of it. And every 11.2 seconds, the world's systems whispered in unison. Not with static, not with interference, but with purpose. Something had arrived, and it was no longer out there in the stars. It was here. The discovery wasn't supposed to happen. The James Webb Space Telescope had been scanning a faint region of space well beyond Neptune's orbit. Its infrared mirrors focused on tracking the faint trail of the Echolantern's corridor. What it found instead left every scientist in the control room staring at the feed in silence. There weren't one or two, but dozens of objects, barely visible at first. They hung against the backdrop of interstellar darkness like invisible shards of glass. The only reason they were detected at all was because Webb's instrument picked up something unnatural, microscopic, fluctuations in reflected signals that matched Earth's own narrowband pulse. They weren't emitting, they were mirroring. Each object reflected our satellite's broadcasts, Voyager's altered message, and the embedded glyph signal, amplifying it in perfect sync. This wasn't debris drifting randomly through space. The objects were moving in a formation, tight, controlled, precise. Telemetry revealed they were arranged in a spiral lattice pattern, a geometry eerily similar to the fractal glyphs decoded earlier. Every movement was synchronized down to milliseconds, like a perfectly choreographed fleet. The objects adjusted their orientation and velocity together, as if responding to a shared command that wasn't coming from Earth. Spectral analysis made the situation even stranger. The surfaces of these objects were made from something that absorbed nearly all visible and infrared light. Not metal, not rock, something far more advanced. They were practically invisible against the void. Only their reflections gave them away. A ghost fleet hiding in plain sight. Engineers ran the radar signatures through every known catalog of artificial and natural bodies. Nothing matched. No propulsion trails, no heat emissions, no sign of decay or collision. The objects moved like they belonged to the vacuum itself. But the most chilling part was their location. The formation wasn't drifting aimlessly. It was positioned between the Echolantern and Earth, aligned perfectly with Voyager 2's trajectory and the solar veil corridor. It was like they were waiting, or guarding. As Webb continued scanning, a new phenomenon emerged. Every time the embedded glyph signal pulsed through Earth's satellite network, the entire fleet shifted slightly, adjusting formation, rotating, responding. It wasn't just mirroring the signal, it was listening to us. Within hours, secondary telescopes confirmed the sighting. Independent observatories picked up the same faint reflections. Governments went into silent lockdown. Nothing was released to the public. The official logs were wiped clean. But the data was already out there, mirrored in academic backups and encrypted clusters. Someone leaked a single frame, a faint spiral pattern of bright dots on a black background. To the untrained eye, it looked like stars. But to those who'd seen the real feed, it wasn't a constellation. It was a fleet. And then, right as the last sequence came through Webb's instruments, the entire formation tilted, almost imperceptibly, toward Earth. No signals were sent. No beams were fired. But everyone who saw that tilt understood one thing. This wasn't random. This was arrival. The message hidden behind Voyager's hijack, the Kronos Bloom, the Infiltration, everything was leading to this moment. The fleet wasn't approaching blindly. It had been here, listening, waiting, and now it had turned its gaze directly at us. The first sign that something extraordinary had happened wasn't a sound. It was the sudden absence of one. For as long as we've had instruments sensitive enough to hear it, the universe has carried a constant background hum, the faint relic of the Big Bang itself. The cosmic microwave background, steady, eternal, unbroken. But then, for 2.4 seconds, that background went completely silent. Every telescope, every sensor, every deep space antenna listening to the universe reported the same thing. The cosmos itself had gone still. No static, no hum, just void. At first, astronomers thought it was a system failure, maybe a power glitch. But it wasn't. Independent stations in Chile, Antarctica, Japan, and orbiting observatories recorded the event in perfect synchronization. The silence wasn't local. It was everywhere. Then came the spike. Right at the edge of the blackout, the background radiation didn't return gradually. It snapped back with a microscopic frequency shift. A shift so precise and so unnatural that it could only mean one thing: something had intervened. The cosmic background was never supposed to change like that. Not in human timescales, not in a billion years. But now, embedded inside its faint whisper, researchers found a new layer. A structured resonance, a fingerprint, the same fractal spiral glyph. This wasn't just a message floating through space anymore. It had been written into the fabric of the universe itself, encoded in the most ancient signal we've ever known. And in that moment, the entire chain of events, the pulse, the shadowing object, the Echolantern, the temporal loop, the hidden fleet, snapped into a chilling new focus. This was never random. It was a response. For decades, Voyager 2 had carried humanity's golden record out into the void, a quiet declaration of our existence. What we didn't understand was that space doesn't just receive messages. Sometimes it answers. The silence wasn't an accident. It was a reset, a rewrite of a single thread in the cosmic code, a quiet insertion of something new. The change was so subtle that most of humanity would never notice. But for those who listened closely, it was undeniable. A signal had been embedded in the foundation of reality itself. Within hours, astrophysicists pieced together the pulse sequence hidden in the shift. It was short, simple, but its translation shook everyone who saw it. "We heard you. We are coming." In the hours that followed, the glyph signal across Earth's networks intensified, synchronizing perfectly with the altered background radiation. Satellites and ground stations pulsed as one, like a single global heartbeat. The hidden fleet maintained its silent orbit, unwavering, watching. The final warning wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. The universe had blinked. Reality itself had been touched. And somewhere out there, something ancient and deliberate was moving closer, not because it had just found us, but because it had always planned to return the moment we spoke first. For decades, Voyager 2 had drifted alone through the endless dark, a fragile machine carrying a golden message from a species desperate to know it wasn't alone. What none of us understood was that the universe had been listening all along, and when it finally answered, it did so not with a whisper, but with a plan. A signal that began as a faint pulse behind a dying probe grew into a symphony that rewrote the stars themselves. Glyphs hidden in the hydrogen resonance, an unseen fleet suspended between the sun and the void, a temporal loop folding time like paper, and a cosmic reset woven into the oldest light in existence. None of it was random. Every piece was a step, a countdown. And now, the world stood on the edge of something it could neither control nor ignore. Satellites pulsed in unison. The night sky hid watchers older and more patient than any empire we've ever built. The hum of the universe carried a new rhythm, one that didn't belong to us. For the first time in human history, we weren't just looking out into the cosmos. The cosmos was looking back. Whether this is a beginning or an ending, no one can say. But when the stars blinked, reality changed. And in the silence that followed, one truth echoed louder than anything before. We sent a message to the universe. And the universe replied, "We heard you. We are coming."